Fortune and Glory, huge box. There isn't enough room for me and the box in the frame, so take a look at the box first. Alright, Fortune and Glory, the Indiana Jones game. I mean, the cliffhanger game. Where did that come from? This is a game published by Flying Frog Productions. Huge box full of excellent components. The quality of everything in this box is really high. Of course, this is also reflected in the price tag, but that's usually the deal. You don't get one without the other. This is a game inspired by the pulp movies and novels of the 30s. And I've read some of those novels and they're pretty fun, so I was interested in trying this game. In this game, the players will play the role of adventurers that are traveling around the world in the 30s, and they're looking for mysterious artifacts that they are going to sell for profit. Yes, our adventurers do not believe that ancient artifacts belong in museums, but at the same time, our adventurers are still doing something good because there are also dangerous villains that are out there that are trying to grab those artifacts, and you know that if a Nazi criminal gets to those ancient mystical artifacts, something bad will come out of that. So our players, our adventurers are going to try to get the artifacts before the villains do. The game can be played in several modes. It can be played solo, competitive, cooperative. I will tell you about the competitive mode first because the cooperative builds on that one. During the game, you will always have 4 artifacts available for the characters to look for. When an artifact is retrieved, it is replaced by a new one at the end of the turn. To create an artifact, you draw a card from the artifact deck and you draw another one from the adventure deck. And you put them together. In this case, for example, I had the Mask of Illusion, or I may have the Shield of Medusa. So you will have different artifacts from game to game. Then for each artifact you draw a locations card that tells you where the artifact goes on the board, and to indicate the position of the artifact on the board you use these skulls here, and you place one there and then the skull of the matching color on the board, and you have different skulls for different artifacts. Each player will use one of the characters available in the game. Each character has some unique abilities described on the character card, different stats in combat, agility, cunning and lore, a certain amount of health points, and a character may or may not have defense. If the character has that, that will help the character during combat because the character will take less damage. And you may play using the nightclub singer, who actually is a martial arts expert. She's an excellent fighter. You may be the flying ace, who has advantages during the movement phase and when it comes to taking flying tests. Duke Dudley, who starts with gear and some money. Also, he really hates the Nazis, so when he fights against them, he gets the adrenaline rush and he gets some extra dice. You may be the reclusive novelist, who has flexibility when it comes to taking tests and drawing cards. So you have a nice gallery of different characters that you can explore, you can combine in different ways. Each character comes with a figurine that is placed on the board at the beginning of the game. Each character also has a starting location. Duke Dudley, for example, always starts in London. At the beginning of each turn, players roll a die to determine initiative. The player that rolled the highest goes first. If you rolled a 1 during this phase, you also get to draw an event card. Event cards usually represent good things for you. These are special actions that you can use, and many times you can use them to get in the way of other players, so in any case to improve your odds of accomplishing certain things. After that, all players roll again, but this time to determine movement, how many movement points they have that turn, and if you roll a 1, again you get an event card. This is why you roll for movement even if you're in a situation where you won't be able to move. You still have to check if you get an event. Then, starting with the initiative player, all players will use their movement points. Traveling on land costs 1 movement point per space. All land spaces are the same, 1, 2, 3, for example. Sea spaces have a number printed on them, and that is the cost in terms of movement points that it costs to travel in that space. For example, in this case it would be 1, 2, 3 movement points. There's also an optional movement which I recommend you use in your games, and that is flying. For 2 fortune that you spend, you can fly to any major city. Major cities are the ones that have a unique illustration on them. Or for 3 fortunes, you can travel to any minor city on the board, such as that one. And all the minor cities have generic illustrations. After all players moved, the characters entered the adventure phase, during which they interact with the space in which they are. If your character is in a city, first thing you draw a city card and you resolve the event. It may be good stuff, not such good stuff happening to you, different types of things. You may use glory to heal your wounds. Glory is the currency in this game. You may also use glory to purchase common items, allies, and gear. Allies and gear cost 5 glory each, and you will draw them randomly from their decks. So the common items actually are face up, and you can choose the item you're buying, and each item has a specific cost, which is indicated there on the top right corner of the card. Also, when you're in a city, you can sell the artifacts that you retrieved earlier in the game, and that is the number of fortune that you will gain by selling that artifact. If you sell the artifact in a major city, you're gonna get an extra 1, in this case 6, for example. If during the adventure phase you are in a sea area or in a land area that does not contain an artifact, then you really die. If you roll a 1, you encounter an enemy that you draw from this deck, and you have to fight against that enemy immediately. If you roll 2 or 3, nothing happens. If you roll 4 to 6, you draw an event and you resolve it immediately. And if during the adventure phase your character is in an area that contains an artifact, that is when things get interesting, because then you can try to grab the artifact. Each artifact includes a number of dangers that you must pass to get that artifact. Each time that you're trying to pass a danger, you will draw a card from this deck. These cards are double-sided, so you have to draw from the middle or from the bottom of the deck so that you do not know what your danger is. And each danger card will force you to take a test. The card will tell you the skill that is being tested, the number that you need to roll to score a success, and the number of total successes you need to have. For example, if this character is trying to take this test, he has 2 in agility, that is the number of dice that he rolls. He rolls 2 dice, and for each 4 or more that he rolls, he scores a success. Luckily enough, you do not have to score all of your successes on the first roll. If you roll a success or more, you can keep rolling and you total together all your successes. As long as you score at least a success, you can keep rolling. In this case, I got 1 of my required 3 successes, and I can roll again. Another 1, now I have 2 out of 3. Good. I passed the test. When you pass the test, you can choose to press on, in which case you simply draw again and you repeat the procedure. Each time that you complete a danger, you receive a danger marker, and if you keep pressing on until you have the required number of dangers, then you simply get the artifact and you add it to your pool. But instead of pressing on, you can also choose to camp down, in which case you cash in the glory that is given to you by the test or tests that you passed. In this case, I would receive 1 glory, and also you get to discard all the ones that you may have received during your adventure. That means that next turn you can go back to exploring the area to take more dangers to get to the required number of danger markers, but now you are fully healed, so you may have better chances to succeed. However, if you fail a test, then you flip the danger card to the cliffhanger side. Your turn is over. You have to wait until next turn to resolve your cliffhanger. On top of that, you lose all the glory that you may have gained, all the glory that you have not cashed in. So when you press on, there's also that danger that you may not get any glory at all. Next turn, when it is the adventure phase, you will resolve your cliffhanger, which will be another test. Now, however, the situation is more desperate, so you're allowed to exert yourself. That means that you can inflict voluntary wounds on yourself, and for each wound that you give to yourself, you get to roll an extra die to pass the test. If you pass the test, you cash in the glory from the cliffhanger immediately, you get the danger marker from passing that test, and you can choose again to calm down or to press on. If you fail the cliffhanger, you are knocked out. That means that you are shipped back to your initial city. Also, you have to roll a die that will indicate the number of resources that you will lose, and you will choose a combination of glory, items, gears, allies that you will lose. You can choose which combination you want, but in this case, for example, I will lose 6 things for being knocked out. During your adventures, you will often find yourself fighting against enemies, such as these ones. Combat is resolved in a series of rounds, during which you will roll a number of dice equal to your combat dice, which may be modified by allies and gears. For example, in this case, he rolls 6 dice, and the enemies will roll a number of dice equal to their fight dice. You roll dice for both, and each 4, 5, or 6 that is scored is a hit. Wow, they are nasty. They score 4 hits against my hero, and he only scores 1. So they take a wound. They score 4 hits, but he only takes 3 because he has a defense of 1, and that is the number of hits that can be ignored each turn. Still is down to 3. It's down to 2. Next round of combat, because you just keep rolling until one of the 2 parties is eliminated. My hero takes another 1, now he's down to 1. Luckily enough, they take 4 hits. They have no defense, so they have to take them all. They go down to less than 0 ones, and they're eliminated. And this is pretty much how the basic game works. You travel around the world looking for artifacts, facing events and enemies. You sell the artifacts that you found. You are the first player to collect 15 fortunes from selling your artifacts, and you return to your starting city. Then you're the winner of the game. The advanced competitive game will allow you to add one or more of several optional features that I do not have the time to cover in detail. I will only tell you about the villains because they're also important for the co-op game. If you're playing using the villains will show up randomly trying to prevent you from getting the artifacts. If you are in a location that has an artifact and a villain is there too, before you can press on, you need to sneak past the villain. To do so, you call a number, suppose I say 1, and then you roll a number of dice equal to the search number of the villain. For each number that you rolled and matches the number that you called, you have to go through a round of combat with the villain before you can press on. In this case, I would have to go against a round of combat against her before I can press on. This is the combat value of the villain. Some villains also have special combat abilities. At the end of the turn, you again roll a number of dice equal to the search value of the villain. For each 4, 5, or 6 that you roll, the villain receives a danger marker, and when the villain has collected the required number of danger marker, and if the villain does that before you do, well, the villain disappears with the artifact, and too bad for you. Small consolation, for each 1 that the villain rolls during the search phase, the villain takes a 1, and in the long run, that may end up killing the villain. In the co-op game, all players are playing together against the villains. The players are still going around the world looking for artifacts and trying to put together a certain amount of fortune, but there is an AI that directs the villains that now systematically attack the board, and they are trying to get the most profitable artifacts before you do. If the villains score a certain amount of points by getting artifacts and also by other means, then they win the game. If the players put together a collective fortune that matches an amount that changes depending on the number of players, and if they do so before the villains meet their victory condition, then the players win the game. If you cannot tolerate luck in games, this is not the game for you. You shouldn't even be in the same room with Fortune and Glory, because this game is going to drive you nuts. This game is heavily luck based, from the cards that you draw and the dice that you roll. Sure, sometimes you can choose your tests, but then if you just know which of the tests gives you the best odds, why would you go for that one? So it is not really something you build a subtle strategy around. You just go for the best rolls that you can get, and then you are again at the mercy of the dice or the cards or whatever. So why would you want to play a game that could be renamed Fortune and Glory, the dice game? Well, because it could also be renamed as Fortune and Glory, the role-playing game, because this is really a game about the story and about the theme. The theme is bursting out of everything in this game, out of the components, the illustrations, the figurines, even the mechanics. I mean, think of the cliffhanger. It really gives me the sense that each turn is an episode in a serial. Something bad is happening to me, but I have to wait until next episode to see how that gets resolved. So it is really about building, creating a story together with your friends. Because of this, I enjoy the co-op mode much more than I enjoy the competitive mode. The competitive mode, well, sometimes the luck factor can get in the way of enjoyment. If another player gets a very precious artifact very close to where the player is, artifact very easy to grab, then there's nothing you can do. The player just gains an insane amount of fortune, and it may be hard for you to come back. You may be frustrated because you will lose games, and it's not your fault, but there's nothing that you can do. You really felt that there was nothing you could do. Things are very different in the co-op mode, because if you're unlucky, then everybody helps you. See, that's quite a difference, because everybody will try to come and rescue. People will see they have cards that they can play to help you. I would say that crazy swings of luck in the co-op mode actually strengthen the camaraderie of the group. The group really has to work together to try to correct luck. And because of this, I had the impression in the co-op mode also players are more in control, which may or may not be true, but I still have that feeling, which makes me enjoy the game, so I'm fine with that. So, in conclusion, I would suggest this game mainly as a cooperative game and exclusively to players that really want to enjoy 2-3 hours of adventure, of great narrative, of great pulp goodness. With the right group, you can have a blast. We had a great time playing it. Sure, it is an expensive game, not the cheapest game that there is around, but overall, it is a fun game.